military perspective, 50,000 troops on either side. Colonel Pandey, you have eyeball to eyeball confrontation in Ladakh, you have eyeball to eyeball confrontation in northeast, in Arunachal, Uttarakhand. What do you see chances of a clash from the military viewpoint?
So, to understand enemy, whether it is China or Pakistan, it is essential to know the psychology of the enemy society. When America attacked Saddam Hussein, his popularity grew because in Arab culture, a man who fights a stronger opponent is considered a stronger man. So whatever America could do to Saddam Hussein, it would never deplete his stock in trade in his country. And it continues even today. I'm glad that Dr. Sriparna spoke about Chinese culture. In the 1900 and around about, when Indian soldiers went to China during the Opium Wars and the Boxer Rebellion, they were called Yindua-san, or they were called the third party, the third person. The first person was China. They were under attack, but they were first person. Britishers were the second person, and unke chamche was what we were. And Chinese have always held us in disdain. In 1924, speaking of contemporary times, before you and me were born, of course, Rabindranath Tagore went about major cities of China giving lectures. His lectures were received differently by different people. But in 1924, the dominant communist view was, we don't want a sermon, we want a materialistic world. We don't want, peace in heaven. We want power on earth. So in 1924, that is how China thought about India, and one of the most brilliant ambassador of India, that is how China thought about. When China started engaging with India, they called it Indian cartographic aggression in 1954, when India started publishing its own maps. They did not recognize the McMahon line. They did not recognize our occupation of Tawang. I was about to say Taiwan, but Tawang. They did not agree to our people or the Buddhist settled in India appointing certain lamas, which they don't even accept today. They did not accept the accession of Askai. They said this was irregular, and that no Chinese government, when PRC replaced communist the earlier dispensation, Chiang Kai-shek, they said that any right-minded person in Beijing could not accept the terms of the Simla Agreement 1914. So they overruled it. When Dalai Lama took refuge in India, they called us expansionists. When the Khampa rebellion took place, they said we were aiding and abetting the Khampas. And then they found time to attack us. Now go back to how China resolves its disputes. I would not agree with Dr. Sriparna, but correct me if I'm wrong. China has not yet resolved its dispute with Vietnam on the South China Sea, so it remains. There may be a few other disputes, but how does it resolve its dispute? In 1969, there was a Chinese-Russian border conflict. On the bank of the Yalu River, the Russians deployed 6 lakh troops, the Chinese deployed 8 lakh troops. Russians lost 50 men, Chinese lost 800 men. So at that time, and maybe even before that, but because I am not as intense a scholar as Dr. Sriparna, the Chinese withdrew. They had a different philosophy, which was very akin to the Meiji restorations in Japan. And they said, let us build our capability, and then we will deal with the world one by one on our own terms. And in the period 2003-2008, they settled the border dispute with Russia. So wherever they go, they don't believe in a small time frame. Their time frame is of centuries, and in that time frame of centuries, what remains central is that China is the middle kingdom. The world has to revolve around it. Now, what she said and what I was talking to her before this session is that one of the greatest problems of the Indian military is that we do not study the Chinese culture, we do not study the Chinese thought, and in my view, weapons alone cannot defeat China. You have to get into that mindset. Very small actions, you know, वो कहते हैं
skirmish.
नो हाथी को चींटी मार देती
अच्छा
है ना. So very small issues can trouble China. What Dr. Sriparna said about vaccine diplomacy was that Indian vaccines were seen to be working better than Chinese vaccines, and that there were many countries which had been given Chinese vaccines and they said keep it, we'll first use the Indian vaccine. So that was a very major diplomatic victory for India and loss of face for China.